How many people have heard of Anthem? All right, not bad. Trivia question. How many people does Anthem insure? All right. This is a crowd who's lively and engaged and knowledgeable. So yeah, Anthem is the second largest insurance company. We insure 40 million members, and Anthem is part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield family. And that the Blue Cross Blue Shield family of health insurance plans insures 100 million Americans. That's about 1 in 3. And the history goes back to 1973 is when essentially the laws changed that allowed for-profit health insurance companies to come into the U.S. And that's where it sort of started us down this path of modern health insurance and healthcare troubles in the U.S. So hopefully I can address some of that. Thank you, Sonia. All right, here we go. Yeah, so I joined Anthem just about a year ago now, and my part of the responsibility that I was given was to create Anthem 2.0 and bring Anthem into the digital age, and is to really kind of rethink insurance and rethink healthcare in the U.S. So what I want to do today is connect some dots. The track title for this afternoon is Consumerization in Health. But in order to get to consumerism in any industry, digitization has to be the precursor and the enabling step that gets us there. So I'll take you through our journey on how we're thinking about consumerism and digital and digitization of health. And so I'll sort of cover this talk in 3 tracks. I'll give you some context and history on how we got here. And in terms of more consumer-centric healthcare, what's unique and different now that we believe the time is right to make that happen. And then I'll close out with some examples of the work that we're doing at Anthem. So as I was researching, sort of the talk and sort of history of insurance, anyone here hear of Lloyd's of London? Okay, so Edward Lloyd had a coffee shop on the Thames, and back in 1691, and it was also where all the major ships were docking. So as the mariners came into the coffee house, they realized that at some point they need insurance for their sea-bearing assets, and that's where Lloyd's of London was formed. And the key thing there is insurance was formed on the basis of insuring downside risks. So if something happens to the ships at sea, Lloyd's of London essentially covers the downside risk. Also, in another part of the UK, this is the Church of Scotland, where the first known form of life insurance was created. And so the priests in the church came up with a set of annuitized tables and actuarial tables, and they had everyone pay premiums into the church, and based on their actuarial tables paid out life insurance sort of policies and life insurance premiums, life insurance benefits. Turns out those actuarial tables are still accurate. And the reason I bring these 2 examples up is not much has changed in the world of healthcare and insurance for more than 300 years. So we're about to embark on a change that's got a lot of history, so it's got to be done with lots of care and thought. I live in Los Angeles, and and those of us that live in here as well as in Los Angeles have a lot of benefits, and it's one of the most beautiful parts of the country. But we're also subject to the occasional wildfire and earthquake here or there, and therefore property and casualty insurance is also something that's top of mind for a lot of us. So fire insurance, property casualty insurance, for the most part, essentially is about underwriting for losses related to property and casualty damages. Not surprising there. But there's an interesting development that's happening. This is a picture of a drone that detects fires early, just sort of detects fires early, and has sort of a water dispensing mechanism to put out the fires before they escalate. And there is a property and casualty insurance company that's offering this as a subscription service. So now you can start to think about insurance not just as a way to protect downside risk, but also to detect, prevent, and hopefully not have to have the catastrophic event in the first place. So the question really is, can this be done for health? Because if we think of healthcare, for the most part, health insurance and the healthcare system is designed around protecting us from the catastrophic events. So if we go to the hospital, have some chronic condition or illness, protecting us from the high cost of that is how the healthcare insurance system in particular is designed. But is there the equivalent to where the drone detection system could be applied to health? And our thesis at Anthem is that, quite simply, the answer is yes. Not only is it possible, but it's imperative from a business model standpoint for us to be able to do that. As to why now, we know that from a societal perspective, we're living longer. We've got great degree of advancements in stem cells, as you're going to hear later on about that topic, genomics, omics, and all other kinds of medical advances are happening at a rapid clip, which is leading us to live longer. There's more urbanization, and then the global sort of power shifts are happening at a rapid clip, where India and China are going to be probably bigger consumer economies in the very near future. And then from the technology and data side, similar exponential changes happening across cloud, edge, AI, robotics, IoT, and all the topics that we're intimately familiar with. And in the meantime, we also can see sort of how computational capacity itself and the ability to create more and more computational sophistication in our hardware is increasing exponentially. Here's an example of a $1,000 laptop, which by the year 2030 is forecasted to have computational capacity of 10 to the power of 16 calculations per second, which is roughly the equivalent of our human capacity to process information. And by 2050, that same $1,000 laptop is expected to have the computational capacity that exceeds all 9 billion or 10 billion of us that will be on the planet. So just think about the power of just computing that's available at our fingertips. So if you take faster, cheaper, more ubiquitous computing power, so as you put faster, cheaper, and more powerful computing capacity combined with networks and sensors, it's estimated that we're going to have more than a trillion sensors as a part of our computing infrastructure in the very near future. We all know the advances in robotics, artificial intelligence, blockchain. There's a track here around that, synthetic biology, and it was just recently an article in the newspaper about gene editing and CRISPR. So if you put all these things together, where you have more and more computing capacity, increasingly sophisticated technologies, the disruption is coming to every industry, healthcare included. And we can either look at it as a blockbuster looking at a Netflix, or we can take advantage of this opportunity collectively and harness it for our own benefit. So the Anthem story is that by applying our data against these set of technologies and these trends, we'd be able to harness and leverage that, and in so doing, ultimately create the solutions that would be more consumer-centric. And while all of this may seem like it will take a long time to unfold, sometimes these changes happen in the blink of an eye, because the exponential effect of these technologies, the doubling of technology sort of maturity every 18 months or so per Moore's law, happens. So when the maturity reaches a billion and you do a billion times a billion, that exponential change happens at a very fast clip. Whereas if it's 0.01 multiplied by 0.01, obviously it's not a big number. So if you put all this together, here's a view from one of my favorite theoretical physicists on what the world may look like just a few years ahead of us. Digitize the middleman, right? So it's a great concept, and I love the way that Michio frames that. So one of the things that we're looking at Anthem is how do we frame digitization of health, and so if you kind of virtualize the bricks and mortars into bits and bytes, you have to really think about it from a supply and demand standpoint, much like you would any other industry. And so supply in healthcare today is very opaque. It's probably the only industry where the supply basically makes the demand wait. So when you go to a doctor's office, how often do you readily see the doctor? You have to wait for the doctor to show up. Making appointments online is very hard to do. And all of these things are symptomatic of the fact that the supply is a black box and demand is not all that predictive and consistent. But if you systematically go through all of the supply points in health and digitize it, instrument it, make it available and open and transparent, then it becomes possible to be more predictive on the demand side. And therefore, in matching up supply and demand more effectively, we'd be able to get to a more optimized supply and demand. Whether that's perfect capitalism or not, that could be up for debate. But at least it would be far more optimized than it is today. So while this may sound far-fetched, this is something that at Anthem we're sort of rolling out in a systematic and incremental manner so that we can get some near-term wins. So here's some examples of what this might look like when it comes to life. So here's an example of a patient at home. And frequently patients have to go to the hospitals for post-op visits and other follow-up care. What if we were able to just pipe in the provider into the patient's home on demand based on sort of supply and demand transparency? So here's what that might look like. Here's Dr. Thomas popping in to see Sarah. Sarah says yes. Dr. Thomas, with his friendly face and bedside manner, concludes the visit, and then following that, Sarah can go back to watching Ben-Hur or whatever other movie that you would like to see. Now, the technology piece of this is really, that USB sort of stick that sticks into a television and a camera that sits on top of it that makes it available. But the harder part of doing this is really understanding Dr. Thomas's schedule and availability, figuring out what would be a good time for Sarah to see Dr. Thomas, and putting it all together. So just one example of the kinds of things that are possible when we try to digitize supply and demand. Here's another example. So monitoring patients at home is a cumbersome and multifaceted problem. Even for something as simple as sleep apnea, the amount of gadgetry that patients have to wear in order to get some simple readings on that is extremely difficult, and therefore the adoption of that is low. Again, is there a way to sort of digitize monitoring and sensors to make at-home care much more convenient, right? Again, so if we do that, then the care could be delivered at home, on demand, at the convenience of the patient, rather than in the hospital in unfamiliar settings with lots of sensors and other things that are poking in your body. So here's an example of one innovation that might change it. So behind the scenes is a wireless piece of equipment, and that's broadcasting the waves, and it's tracking this person that's not wearing anything, and that dot on the red is kind of showing you sort of his walking and how it's tracing it. It's super interesting, and the science of that is really amazing. But the applications of technologies like that are really groundbreaking. So we can detect, lots of things related to heart conditions, Parkinson's disease. If someone were likely to fall or is falling, we could be detecting that, as well as mood disorders, Alzheimer's, and several other things along those lines. And again, so why is this important? If you look back at the before of this is the state of affairs today with how patients are monitored. And in the future, if we can get rid of all that clutter, and the data streams in from people's homes, then many different sort of innovations are possible in the care delivery world. Again, just some examples of things that we're working on. All right, we'll play some music, get up and start doing some push-ups with Rocky. So while I talk quite a bit about technology, really what's going to make a difference in the end with all of this is going to be building truly consumer-centric brands. So I flew Southwest up here from LA, and it's one of the most loved brands in the airline industry. And I was reading a bit of news about Southwest. Turns out that after 9/11, when the entire airline industry was in trouble, many of the Southwest passengers and flyers sent checks to Southwest and contributed money to Southwest to keep them out of trouble. Now, how many brands in healthcare have that kind of a reputation where patients say, we love you more than our dog? That's the name of the book that Jeannie Blister wrote about brands that invoke that type of loyalty in customers. There's Zappos, maybe there's Amazon, there's Southwest, Apple, people stand in line to buy phones. But not really that much more, those kind of brands don't exist in healthcare. So our goal at Anthem is to build that kind of brand loyalty to the type of solutions that we're creating. And then why is Sylvester Stallone on this slide? Well, here's the connecting the dots here. So Stallone wrote the script for the Rocky movies, or the original Rocky movie in the 70s. And he attempted to get it made, and he was declined by several of the production houses. And eventually someone offered him $50,000 for that script, and he said he would sell it to them for that money, provided they cast him in it. And they said no. And then several other people said no, and eventually he was so broke that he had to sell his dog, but he kept his dream alive of shooting that movie and making that movie happen. Eventually someone did buy that script from him and cast him in that movie, and the rest is history. So to make all these things happen, so when we talk about consumerization of health and making this transformation happen, we need to have Rocky's spirit and Stallone's spirit and the relentless sort of pursuit of these things in order to bring this to life. So with that, thank you.
We will now open the session to question and answers. So if you have a question, please feel free to come here or just put your hand up and I'll come out there. All right, we have some questions.
Thank you, Rajeev. That was great. Just a quick question. You started off talking about the proactive nature of how you want to take it to healthcare, right? Most of the examples that you showed, though they are great, was still a little bit reactive. Could you talk a little bit more about the proactive things that will prevent people from getting into those spaces in the first place?
Yeah, excellent question. So we have a set of projects underway that we're calling health trajectories, which essentially would map out what might happen next in a person's healthcare journey. And rather than sort of reacting to the event when it happens, we've got a set of recommendations and interventions, both digital as well as through our outbound clinical outreach programs, that would intervene and say, here's essentially the steps that one can take in order to alter that trajectory. So that's, in a nutshell, is the transformation of our business model is to that. Obviously, we're really good at managing our sick population and making them less sick and being disciplined about underwriting to make money on it. But where we see the transformative impact happening is being able to predict what might happen next in a person's healthcare journey and taking steps to alter that trajectory.
Hi, Rajeev. Dinesh from Department of Surgery. Great talk. I'm just talking about Anthem is a really big enterprise. How does it work with the physician entrepreneurs to push? Because I think Anthem does not have that kind of bandwidth to think about the patient-related issues. How does it work closely with the physicians to bring the advanced products?
Yeah, good question, Dinesh. Thank you. So we partner with physicians to bring this to life. We have a group of providers, doctors that co-design with us and are part of our advanced, design collaboration, where we come up with these programs collaboratively with them, and we do pilots, see what's working and what isn't. And then based on the results of those pilots, then we would scale that out to the rest of our provider network. Our strategy is not to own provider networks. United's strategy is very different. They actually own the care delivery infrastructure. Kaiser in California obviously is different. They own the care delivery infrastructure. Our strategy is that we want to capture and virtualize the knowledge of medical practices across the country and make it available and democratize it to all of our providers. But we can only do that in partnership with our provider network.
Hi, Rajeev. Thank you for your time today. I was really looking forward to your chat. I'm the person that got that trivia question right, by the way. Since we're here at TiEcon, it's all about startups and getting innovation out. And the reason we have this track is around digital health and innovation. So I'm a founder and CEO of a digital health startup. We were one of the TI 50 winners last year. And we're actually talking to some of your folks in Anthem, in one of the other parts of Anthem. And what I'm curious about, because I talk to a lot of these large payer systems as well as provider systems, and one of the big pain points in healthcare that's particularly challenging relative to other enterprises is that ridiculously long sales cycle. You know this.
Right.
So my question is, and that's actually much more of a challenge with the digital health startup, because quite often a lot of your the capital you need is to just withstand that sales cycle. So my question is, how do we as startups work with these big guys like you, and what can your group specifically do? How can you help maybe facilitate that or shorten it? Because it seems like this is kind of your area if you're talking about digital solutions. So.
Yeah. Well, congrats on winning the award last year. The good news is, the way that we've set up the digital group within Anthem is to operate like a startup within the mothership. And so 2 ways to answer your question. One, we're moving Anthem to be more of a platform company, where we're going to build certain capabilities clearly, but we're also looking for a variety of, I would say, capability partners to bring our ecosystem to life, because we're not going to have the time nor the resources to build everything. So how do we do that quickly? We actually we just announced the launch of an incubator in Palo Alto, where you can come pitch us your ideas. If it fits with our roadmap, if it's aligned to our strategy, we'd want to move rapidly from ideation to pilots to scaling. So as opposed to the 6, 9, 12-month long sales cycles to bring something to life. So yeah, if you're interested, let us know and we can get you more information on that.
I know we have a number of questions from the audience, but to respect the time of the other panels that we have and speakers we have, we'll restrict it to 3 questions, and you're welcome to talk to the speaker after he's done. So we will end this now, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.